March 2026. A quiet stretch of road on Jupiter Island, Florida. No crowds, no cameras, just the low hum of tires against asphalt. And then suddenly, flashing lights cutting through the darkness. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded a wreck that didn't look ordinary. A car overturned, debris scattered, and one name began to circulate in hushed, almost disbelieving tones. Tiger Woods. Because what happened on that road wasn't just an accident, it was the beginning of something no one saw coming. For decades, Tiger Woods had been more than an athlete. He was golf's North Star, the man who didn't just dominate the sport, he redefined it. 15 major championships, a career that survived scandal, injury, and doubt. Every time the world thought he was finished, he came back stronger, more focused, more dangerous. He wasn't supposed to be fragile. He wasn't supposed to be human, which is why, when the first alerts hit, Tiger Woods arrested after car crash, it didn't just shock the sports world, it shattered the illusion. At first, the details were unclear. Some reports called it a simple accident. Others hinted at something more serious. But then the truth began to surface. This wasn't a minor collision. This was a rollover crash involving another vehicle, a violent impact that flipped one of the most recognizable figures on the planet upside down, both literally and figuratively. Witnesses described chaos. Twisted metal, a scene that felt less like a routine traffic incident and more like the aftermath of something far more dangerous. And that's when the story took a turn no one expected. Because as authorities arrived and assessed the situation, the focus shifted. This wasn't just about how the crash happened. It was about what they found when they got there. The condition, the behavior, the details that didn't quite add up. And in that moment, what should have been a straightforward accident investigation became something far more complicated. Because what police discovered at the scene would turn a simple crash into something much bigger. To understand how everything spiraled, you have to rewind the scene to just seconds before impact. According to early reports from Reuters and The Guardian, Tiger Woods was driving along a narrow stretch of road when he attempted a routine maneuver, overtaking a truck ahead of him. It was the kind of decision drivers make every day, calculated. Ordinary, forgettable, but in this moment, something went wrong. As Woods moved to pass, his vehicle clipped the trailer, and in an instant, control was gone, because what happened next unfolded faster than anyone could react. The impact wasn't just a collision, it was a chain reaction. The contact with the trailer sent the vehicle off balance, and within seconds, the car flipped. A full rollover, metal twisting, glass shattering, momentum turning into chaos. This wasn't the kind of crash you walk away from without consequences. At highway speeds, a rollover can be catastrophic. Inches separate survival from tragedy. And as the vehicle came to a violent stop, one question hung in the air. How did it not end there? Because by all accounts, this could have been the final chapter of Tiger Woods. When first responders arrived, they weren't just dealing with a damaged vehicle, they were assessing a legend in distress. Officers approached cautiously, expecting shock, adrenaline, confusion, but what they encountered was something harder to explain. Woods appeared disoriented, slowed, described by witnesses and officials as almost lethargic, not panicked, not fully present. It was the kind of behavior that immediately raises red flags in any roadside investigation. And in that moment, the focus shifted from the crash itself to the man behind the wheel. Because something about this didn't feel right. Then came the detail that made everything more complicated. There was no alcohol, no immediate evidence of drinking, no clear, obvious explanation. The most common answer, the one that usually closes cases like this, was suddenly off the table. And with that, the mystery deepened. Because if it wasn't alcohol, what caused one of the greatest athletes in history to lose control? What happened next is where the story stopped being about a crash and started becoming something far more serious. As officers continued their assessment at the scene, the tone shifted. Questions turned sharper. Observations turned into suspicion. And then, the moment no one expected, Tiger Woods was placed under arrest on suspicion of DUI. Not cited. Warned. Arrested. For a figure of his magnitude, that single decision sent shockwaves far beyond the roadside. Because this wasn't just a legal procedure, it was a signal that something deeper was unfolding. But it wasn't the arrest itself that raised the biggest alarm. It was what came immediately after. As part of standard protocol, authorities requested a chemical test, a routine step that often clarifies everything. Alcohol, drugs, nothing at all. This is where cases are usually resolved. But Woods refused. A refusal of a urine test doesn't just complicate an investigation, it transforms it. Legally, it can carry its own consequences. Narratively, it creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, speculation grows louder than facts, because when the clearest path to answers is declined, people start asking why. That single decision reframed everything. Investigators began looking beyond alcohol, beyond the obvious. According to multiple reports, the focus shifted toward a different possibility: prescription medication impairment. A quieter, more complex explanation, the kind that doesn't announce itself but slowly reveals its impact. This wasn't reckless partying, this was something more subtle, more dangerous in its own way. And suddenly the story wasn't about a mistake behind the wheel. Mito was about what might have been happening long before he ever got into the car. Because at this point, the crash was no longer the center of the narrative. It was just the trigger, the visible moment that exposed something hidden beneath the surface. This wasn't just about what happened on that road, it was about what might have led to it. By now, the narrative had moved beyond the crash, beyond the arrest, and into something far more uncomfortable. Because as new details surfaced, the past came with them. Reports highlighted by New York Post began drawing connections that were impossible to ignore. This wasn't the first time Tiger Woods had faced a situation like this. In 2017, he was arrested under similar circumstances, found behind the wheel, disoriented, later revealing a mix of prescription medications in his system. At the time, it was framed as an isolated incident, a mistake, a moment of weakness. But now, nearly a decade later, the echoes were getting louder. Because patterns don't repeat themselves by accident. To understand that pattern, you have to look at the body behind the legend. Years of dominance came at a cost. Multiple back surgeries, knee procedures, chronic pain that never fully disappeared, the kind of physical toll that doesn't fade when the cameras turn off. And with that pain came treatment, medication, recovery cycles that blurred the line between healing and dependency. For fans, Tiger Woods was the comeback king, the man who won the 2019 Masters against all odds. But behind that story was a quieter reality. Recovery isn't just physical. And sometimes it doesn't end when the trophy is lifted. This is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, you have one of the greatest athletes in history, a symbol of discipline, precision, and control. On the other, a human being navigating pain, pressure, and expectation at a level few could comprehend. The same man who could control a golf ball down to the millimeter, now appearing unable to control the moment behind the wheel. It's a contradiction that feels almost surreal. But maybe that's the point, because legends aren't immune to struggle, they just hide it better. And that's what reframes everything about this incident, that this wasn't just a crash, it wasn't just an arrest, it was a window into something ongoing, something unresolved, a story that didn't start on that Florida road, and may not end there either. Because the real question now isn't what happened that night, it's whether this was the breaking point, or something he had been fighting for years. In the hours that followed, the situation unfolded with a strange kind of quiet intensity. After being taken into custody, Tiger Woods was held for several hours as the investigation continued behind closed doors. No immediate answers, no clear resolution. And then, just as suddenly as it escalated, he was released. No dramatic courtroom moment, no definitive statement, just a legend walking back into the world under a cloud that felt heavier than anything he had faced on the course. Because sometimes the silence after an event speaks louder than the event itself. But outside those walls, the reaction was anything but quiet. The news spread instantly. Headlines flooded timelines. Sports networks interrupted programming. And across the world, fans tried to process what they were seeing. Some responded with concern, pointing to the visible signs of struggle, the years of physical pain, the possibility of something deeper. Others reacted with frustration, even disappointment. How could someone with everything risk so much again? The divide was immediate, emotional, and impossible to ignore. Because when a figure like Tiger Woods falls, people don't just react, they take sides. And that's when the story fully transformed. This was no longer about golf, not about majors, rankings, or comebacks. The fairways and trophies faded into the background, replaced by questions that cut much deeper. What happens when greatness collides with vulnerability? When the image the world believes in no longer matches the reality unfolding in front of them? For the first time in years, Tiger Woods wasn't being judged for his performance, but for something far more personal. And that changes everything, because now the conversation isn't about what he's won, it's about what comes next. Can one moment redefine a career built over decades, or is this just another chapter in a story defined by resilience?